I'm Erik Dailey. I teach at Azusa Pacific University and Fuller Theological Seminary, and I also pastor a church in Los Angeles, California. And I'm the author of The Fit Shall Inherit the Earth, a Theology of Sport and Fitness. Writing this book, in one sense, was trying to think theologically about why I go to swim practice every single day and why I love competing in triathlons, and to really just apply theological principles to those passions, to those pursuits that I have, and see if there's even more to gain and more to think about in those conversations. And I found that there's actually a whole large conversation going on right now about sports and theology and the Christian faith, and I wanted to add in there physical fitness. How do we understand our physical fitness pursuits, and specifically, how do we understand our bodies, the bodies that we have that were given to us by God? In American culture, a lot of people see fitness as a vain pursuit, as a pursuit that really has no meaningful end. But I argue that if we take the doctrine of creation seriously and we think about a good creation, about how God created good, then our bodies are part of creation. And that if we are to treat God's creation with kindness and respect because God created it, then we need to do the same for our bodies. And if we believe that God made us into creators as well, that we have creative capacities, then that extends into our bodies. What are we creating and making with our bodies? Am I making my body or utilizing these gifts that I have in my body to utilize it to its full extent, to transform it into what it potentially can be within the context that I'm in? Those are some of the questions that I'm looking at here and wrestling with here. Fitness has been an important aspect of my life ever since I finished seminary. I was not very healthy when finishing seminary, finishing my Master's of Divinity degree. And I thought maybe there must be more to this, especially as I was working as a hospital chaplain and seeing people who were ill, who maybe could have made better choices when they were my age. And so I came to a new fitness awakening and wanting to take care of my body. But I never really had any understanding of how that might fit in with my spiritual life as well, and my life as a pastor and a Christian leader. There was a time when I was in a swimming race in a distance that I'd never swam before, 5,000 meters. My wife asked me to predict my time. And I predicted my time, and I came out of the water, and I was only 3 seconds off of that time. And the first thought that came into my mind was, I know who I am. This wonderful feeling of knowing who I am. And I've known a lot of other people who have pursued fitness and pursued sport and really found a lot of meaning making in those activities. So I want to think deeper and more theologically about the meaning making that we have in these activities, that when we engage in these activities as creative activities, as activities where we're making something out of God's good creation. In the book, I distinguish fitness as a subset of sport. So there are a lot of people actually talking about the theology of sport right now. And the contribution I wanted to make was particularly to fitness, because fitness had not been addressed in the literature. So I treat fitness as a subset of sport. There's a lot of overlap. We look at sports like cycling, where there's competitive cyclists, but you can go out on the road on a nice day and you'll see hundreds of cyclists who might be competing with one another, but they're also pursuing fitness and pursuing a life of health. So there's a lot of overlap between the two, even as the two can potentially be distinguished in other ways as well. Why is sport good? There have been a number of answers to that. Historically, sport has been perceived as good, at least in Christian and philosophical circles, because it can produce something else. The muscular Christian movement was about utilizing sport to build character, to do character building, to build upstanding young citizens. Evangelists have used athletes as spokespeople to bring people into church. So sport was good because it could produce something else. And in the Platonic tradition, too, it's understood that utilizing your body and engaging in sport actually has a benefit for the soul. Other people have argued that sport has an intrinsic value, that it's good in and of itself. I have issue with that because if we look at modern art in the sense of art for art's sake, we can see that modern art, when it's simply just art for art's sake, it is devoid of responsibility. And so as Christians, we are always thinking about what is our responsibility to God. So my argument is that sport is good because it can participate in God's redemptive processes in the world, in the ways that God is redeeming the world. That sport can be a part of God's redemptive work. And we see this in a whole number of different ways, how it creates meaning, how it creates good self-esteem for young people. And the part that I look particularly at is how it can make us healthy. It can make us strong. It can make us form our bodies into strong, healthy bodies that can do things in the world. So it's not purely an intrinsic value, it's not purely a utilitarian value, but it can have value, potentially have value in participating in the things that God is doing in the world and God's redemptive plans for the world. So that's how I argue that sport is in fact good. My own physical fitness pursuits have brought an incredible awareness to who I am, to how God created me, to how I exist in a culture, in a society. It's helped me to see just this incredible way that God has made our bodies, the incredible intricacies in the ways that God has made our bodies, things that theology often neglects. And it's helped me see processes. There's a bit of mysticism to just triathlon training, to the amount of organization and the amount of discipline that goes into it. And it can be a very prayerful activity as well. There are actually a number of Christian endurance athletes out there, particularly Sister Madonna Buter, who looks at sporting pursuits as prayerful activities. That in and of themselves are a means to connect with God. And that's something that has been meaningful to me as well in my own pursuits. There are issues with how particularly Americans pursue sport and fitness, and we can't be blind to those issues. Many people will pursue fitness purely as an end for vanity. It's not wrong to think that many people pursue it as an end just for vanity, or as something that could even separate us from God, or that people pursue sport as a faith system apart from God, or that people pursue sport purely as a meaning-making device in and of itself, or that people damage their bodies in their pursuit of sport and fitness. There's all kinds of opportunity to truly do lasting damage to your body as you pursue sport and fitness. I believe that we need to pursue these things in a proper context. What are the ends here? Are we pursuing God's ends for redemption of the world? And are we seeing ways that sport can participate in God's redemptive ends? Or are we simply just seeking our own ends as we pursue sport and fitness? And that's a question that we constantly have to ask ourselves. And especially for those who are a bit older and aren't necessarily looking for those Division I scholarships, we have to think about how we pursue sport and fitness in our own context when we have jobs and children too. But how can we be our absolute best selves in the context where we are, serving God in the place where we are? One of the big questions that's out there right now is how do we address the obesity crisis that's in the United States and is really becoming a worldwide pandemic as well. I just personally, as a pastor, would have a lot of trouble preaching about obesity and standing in the pulpit and saying something that might come off as insensitive or judgmental. We have a lot of misunderstandings about what has caused the obesity crisis, and we do need to make sense of it. We've told ourselves a couple of stories about how our bodies are made. Either it's purely my choice, my body is shaped the way it is because of all the choices that I have made, and the bad choices that I've made very well might be sinful. Or we hear the story that our bodies are totally determined. The shape of our body is determined by factors completely outside ourselves. I argue that neither of those is true, and neither of those is accurate to what God has actually done in our world. Yes, we do have to make choices, but we are also part of large and complex systems. And what we've seen is that as the environment has been abused and taken advantage of, and that the food that we eat today, the processed manufactured food that we eat today that comes at the expense of the environment, is having a negative effect on us, on our own bodies. And so we see the imperative to be ecologically aware, to take care of the environment, to take care of God's good creation. That care for God's creation has an impact on our bodies, on ourselves. So we are an extension of that environmental care. So we need to see that we are not completely independent people, that our bodies are shaped not just by our choices, but they are shaped by the cultures that we are in, the places that we're in, the foods that are available to us or the foods that are not available to us. And we need to make sense of this, because the obesity epidemic is exactly that. It's an epidemic. It's estimated now that in the United States alone, we're looking at $200 billion a year spent on obesity-related illness and disease. So how can a pastor preach to that while still be sensitive? I think this book offers some real opportunities for pastors to be able to preach to what is becoming a major health crisis in the world today.